I want you to picture a man, and I want you to try and reconcile two images of him that frankly just shouldn't fit in the same frame. In the first image, he is the father of the Soviet hydrogen bomb. He is the architect of the Tsar Bomba, the single most destructive device ever detonated by human beings. We are talking about a weapon that could, flatten a major city and shatter windows hundreds of miles away.
A weapon that literally sent a shockwave around the entire planet. Not once, 3 times.
3 times, right. So that's image 1.
Yeah.
Now overlay image 2. The exact same man accepting the Nobel Peace Prize. A man described as the conscience of mankind. A man who spent years in exile starving himself, literally starving himself, to protest a totalitarian regime. We are talking about Andrei Sakharov.
Yeah.
The mission for this deep dive is to figure out how on earth you get from point A to point B. How do you go from designing the ultimate tool of state annihilation to drafting a democratic constitution for that very state?
It is maybe the ultimate paradox of the 20th century. And honestly, it's not just a history lesson. It's a case study in what happens when this kind of deep technical genius collides with a moral awakening.
Right.
And if you're looking for a simple story where he was a bad guy who turned good, you just aren't going to find it here. It is so much more complicated and so much more interesting than that.
That is exactly what I want to get into, because usually when we hear about these figures, it feels inevitable. He saw the light. But looking at the source material we have, his memoirs, the KGB files, they're now public, the scientific papers, it seems like a brutal, jagged process.
It was. Sakharov didn't just change his mind. He had to deconstruct his entire worldview. You have to remember, for half his life, he was the ultimate insider.
Oh, completely.
He had the dacha, the car, the direct line to the Kremlin, bodyguards, everything. He gave all of that up. And to understand why, we have to look at the raw data of his life.
So let's rewind. Let's go all the way back. Before he was a dissident or a bomb maker, who was he? Because you don't just wake up and invent thermonuclear fusion.
No, you don't. He was born in Moscow in 1921. And if we look at his childhood, we see this really unique incubation chamber, for want of a better word.
Okay.
His father was a physics professor, but he was also a pianist. So Sakharov is hearing Bach and Beethoven in the living room, and then he's discussing physics equations at the dinner table. It's this incredible synthesis.
That is a potent mix. You've got the rigid structure of physics, and then the pure emotion of music.
Exactly. And then there's the grandfather. He was a lawyer in the old Tsarist Russia, and he was famous for something very specific. He was a fierce advocate against capital punishment.
Wow.
He believed that the state, under no circumstances, had the right to take a human life.
That is some serious foreshadowing. You couldn't write it better.
It is. So Sakharov grows up in this atmosphere where intellectual rigor is prized, but so is human dignity. Now, regarding his beliefs, this is interesting, he was an atheist. He decided around age 13 that God didn't exist. But, and this is a nuance that the sources really highlight, he wasn't a nihilist.
Right. I read that he believed in a guiding principle. What does that actually mean for a guy who deals in hard math and physics?
It's fascinating. He couldn't accept a religious deity, a personal god, but he also couldn't accept that the universe was just cold, random mechanics. He felt there was a warmth, as he put it, or a meaning that sort of transcended the physical laws. He couldn't prove it, but he felt it. It's almost like he had a spiritual sense without a religion to put it in.
Which probably made him a very complicated person to have a beer with. But let's get to the science. World War II happens, the Soviets are desperate, they're playing catch-up, and Sakharov gets pulled into the machine.
He's a prodigy. I mean, a true prodigy. He gets his doctorate in 1947. He's incredibly young. And he is recruited by Igor Tamm, another brilliant physicist, into the secret nuclear program.
And we need to set the scene here, right? This isn't a university lab with tweed jackets.
Not at all. This is the late 40s. Stalin is in charge. Lavrentiy Beria, the head of the secret police, the NKVD, is personally overseeing the bomb project. If you fail, you don't just get fired.
You disappear.
You disappear. The pressure is unimaginable.
High stakes, to put it mildly. And the Americans are already ahead. They've dropped the bombs on Japan.
The Americans have the atomic bomb. They've used it. The Soviets test their first atomic bomb, a copy, really, of the American design, in 1949. But everyone knows the next step is the super, the hydrogen bomb. Fusion.
Okay, I want to pause here because I think most people hear fission and fusion and just think big boom. But the difference really matters here, doesn't it? The physics of it.
It matters immensely. Fission is splitting a heavy atom, like uranium or plutonium, that's Hiroshima. You get a huge release of energy. Fusion is the opposite. You're smashing light atoms together, like hydrogen isotopes, deuterium, tritium, to make a heavier one.
And that releases even more energy.
Way more energy. It's what powers the sun. The problem is, to get those atoms to smash together and fuse, you need incredible heat and pressure. Millions of degrees of heat.
You need a trigger. You need something to start the fire.
You need an atomic bomb just to light the match. So the Americans and the Soviets are both frantically trying to figure out how to arrange the fuel so it actually ignites instead of just, blowing apart.
And this is where Sakharov has his first huge breakthrough.
This is his second idea. The Soviets called it the sloka.
Which means layer cake. I just love that the most dangerous weapon on Earth is named after a pastry.
It is some dark humor for sure, but the name is accurate. Imagine a sphere. In the very center, you have a fission trigger, a small atomic bomb. Then you wrap that in layers.
Like an onion.
Exactly like an onion or a layer cake. You put a layer of fusion fuel lithium deuteride, a solid form of hydrogen. Then you wrap that in a layer of uranium, then another layer of fusion fuel, then another layer of uranium.
And the idea is that when the center goes off, it cooks the layers from the inside out.
Basically. The fission explosion in the center sends out a shock wave and a burst of neutrons. It compresses and heats the first fusion layer until it ignites. But here's the trick, the really clever part.
Okay.
They put a shell of natural, unenriched uranium around the fusion fuel. When the fusion happens, it releases a flood of very high-energy neutrons. Those neutrons are energetic enough to hit the natural uranium and cause it to fission too.
So you get a boost. It's a fission reaction.
A chain reaction within a chain reaction.
Mm-hmm.
It was an incredibly clever design, and it was tested in 1953. It was the first true Soviet thermonuclear device that was deployable, that you could actually put on a bomber.
And for Sakharov, this must have been a moment of incredible triumph.
Oh, he became a national hero overnight. He was elected to the Academy of Sciences at 32, the youngest ever. He got all the perks. The best apartment, bodyguards, the works. He was a state treasure.
But there was a limit to the layer cake, wasn't there? You can't just keep adding layers forever.
Right. It's a brute force approach. To get a bigger explosion, you have to add more layers, and the whole thing becomes too heavy and inefficient to fly on a plane. The yield is limited. To get to the really, really big numbers, the city killers, you needed a different approach entirely. You needed the third idea.
And this is where the parallel discovery happens. This is one of the most fascinating bits of Cold War history. The Americans call it the Teller-Ulam design. Sakharov, in total isolation, figured it out on his own.
He did. He and his team. The breakthrough was realizing you can't just pack everything together in one ball. It's too messy. You need to separate the trigger from the main fuel.
So you have two separate parts inside the bomb casing.
Exactly. You put the atomic bomb trigger, the primary stage, at one end of a casing, and you put the fusion fuel cylinder, the secondary stage, at the other end.
Okay, but then how does the one set off the other if they aren't touching? That's the part that always confused me.
X-rays.
X-rays. Like at the dentist.
Much, much more intense. But yes, fundamentally the same thing. When the primary atomic bomb goes off, it releases a flood of soft X-rays. Now, X-rays are light. They travel at the speed of light, which is much faster than the physical shock wave or the debris from the explosion.
So the light gets there first.
Instantly. The X-rays fill the casing, which is usually lined with a special plastic foam. The radiation hits this foam and turns it into plasma, super hot gas. This creates immense radiation pressure. It's this pressure that squeezes the fusion fuel cylinder from all sides simultaneously and perfectly.
So it's like a phantom piston made of light crushing the fuel until it ignites.
That is a perfect analogy. That is radiation implosion. It's an elegant, almost beautiful piece of physics. And once Sakharov cracked that, the ceiling on how big a bomb you could build, it just vanished.
You can make them as big as you want.
As big as you wanted. The size was only limited by the size of the airplane you could build to carry it.
Which brings us to the Tsar Bomba, 1961. 50 megatons. I struggle to even visualize that number.
Let's try. The Hiroshima bomb was about 15 kilotons. A kiloton is 1,000 tons of TNT. A megaton is 1,000,000 tons. The Tsar Bomba was 50,000 kilotons.
Oh my God.
If you dropped it on Paris, the fireball, just the sphere fire, not the blast radius, would act like a soldering iron across the entire city center. Third-degree burns would happen 100 kilometers away.
100 kilometers. That's from London to, what, Cambridge.
Roughly, yeah.
Yeah.
When they tested it in the Arctic, the flash was visible 1,000 kilometers away. The shockwave broke windows in Finland and Norway. It was an absolute monster. And Sakharov was the guy making sure the math worked.
This is the part where I get stuck. He sees this. He knows what it does.
Oppenheimer, after the Trinity test, had that famous I am become death moment. He was haunted by it for the rest of his life. Did Sakharov have that same immediate guilt, that sense of sin?
This is the surprising part. No, not at first. We have to look at the timeline. In the 1950s and early 60s, Sakharov was a true believer in the logic of deterrence.
Okay.
He looked at the geopolitical board and he said, if the Americans have this weapon and we don't, they will dictate terms. They will engage in nuclear blackmail. Or worse, they might be tempted to launch a first strike.
So in his mind, building the bomb was an act of peace, or at least an act of preventing war.
An act of preservation. He saw it as creating a balance.
Yeah.
A balance of terror, sure, but a stable one. He didn't feel he had known sin in the same way Oppenheimer did, because he wasn't building it to use it. He was building it so no one would use it. It's a very cold utilitarian calculus. It sounds like the logic of a man who trusts the equation, but maybe forgets the variables of human lives. But that shell started to crack. It wasn't the explosion itself that changed him, though, which is fascinating. It was the testing.
Yes. This is a crucial distinction. He was okay with the existence of the weapons as a deterrent locked away in a silo. He was not okay with detonating them in the atmosphere for practice over and over again.
Because of the fallout, the radiation.
Exactly. Sakharov started doing what he always did. He ran the numbers. He looked at the radioactive isotopes being released. Carbon-14, with a half-life of thousands of years. Strontium-90, which mimics calcium and gets into the food chain.
Into milk, into bones.
Into the bones of children. And unlike a war where you have combatants, this hits everyone. It's indiscriminate.
He actually calculated a death toll for peacetime testing, didn't he?
He did. He published a paper on it. He estimated that for every megaton detonated in the atmosphere, somewhere between 10 and 20,000 people would eventually die prematurely from cancer or suffer from serious genetic defects over the coming centuries.
So every test had a body count.
A hidden statistical body count. So when the Soviet leadership wanted to test a new bomb, not for any technical reason, but just for a political flex, Sakharov saw it as mass murder.
That is the pivot. Strategic necessity becomes pointless murder.
That's it. There is a story where he tries to stop a test in 1961. He calls the military leaders, he calls the minister in charge, he begs, he argues, and they basically pat him on the head and say, stick to physics, Andrei Dmitrovich, we handle the politics.
Wow.
He realized then that he was just a tool. He was the brain they used to build the gun, but they wouldn't let him have any say in when to pull the trigger.
That loss of control seems to be the catalyst.
Right.
But before we get into his full rebellion, his activism, I want to make sure we don't skip over his other life. Because if Sakharov had never seen a bomb, if he had never been involved in the military program, we'd still be talking about him in physics classrooms today, right?
Absolutely. The man was a fountain of ideas. And some of them are so fundamental to how we understand the universe today that it's almost scary he was doing this in his spare time while managing a nuclear arsenal.
Let's start with the tokamak. This connects directly to the search for clean energy, which is a huge topic right now.
It connects directly. In 1950, while he was deep in H-bomb work, Sakharov and his mentor, Igor Tamm, proposed a way to harness fusion for peaceful energy. Not an explosion, but a controlled, steady burn.
Okay, so the same problem exists. You have this plasma, this super hot gas that's millions of degrees. It melts anything it touches. You can't put it in a steel tank.
Right. So how do you hold something that hot?
With a magnetic field.
You use a magnetic bottle, but what shape? That was the question. Sakharov proposed a donut shape.
A donut.
A donut. You wrap the donut in powerful magnetic coils. The magnetic field lines run around inside the torus, and they act like invisible rubber bands, squeezing the plasma and keeping it floating in the center, away from the walls.
And that's the tokamak.
That is the tokamak. It's a Russian acronym. Toroidalnaya kamera s magnetnymi katushkami. Toroidal chamber with magnetic coils.
So every time we hear about a new breakthrough in fusion energy, it's probably happening inside one of these magnetic donuts he dreamed up.
Almost certainly. If you look at ITER in France, the massive international fusion project costing tens of billions of dollars, it is a giant tokamak. Sakharov's design from 1950 is still our best bet for achieving clean, virtually infinite energy.
So he gave us the weapon to destroy the world and the tool to save it with infinite energy. Talk about duality.
And it gets deeper, it gets more profound. He also tackled one of the most existential questions possible. Why are we here? And I don't mean that philosophically. I mean literally, why is there stuff? Why does matter exist?
You're talking about the baryon asymmetry. Can we unpack that without needing a PhD?
Let's try the coin toss analogy. According to the Big Bang Theory, in the first moments of the universe, pure energy converted into pairs of particles, matter and antimatter.
Right, an electron and a positron, a proton and an antiproton.
Exactly. And the laws of physics, as we understood them, said this should happen in equal amounts. A perfect 50-50 split. For every particle of matter, one particle of antimatter.
And if matter and antimatter touch, they annihilate. They turn back into energy with a puff of light.
Right. So if the Big Bang produced a perfect 50-50 split, everything should have annihilated everything else almost instantly. The universe should be nothing but a uniform bath of light. No stars, no gas, no planets, no people.
But clearly, we are here. We are made of matter. So somehow, matter won. The coin toss didn't land 50-50.
It was a weighted coin. And Sakharov was the first person to figure out how it was weighted. He proposed 3 conditions, they're now called the Sakharov conditions, that would allow the universe to create slightly more matter than antimatter.
How slight is slightly?
Incredibly slight. For every billion particles of antimatter, the universe made 1,000,001,000 particles of matter. After all the annihilation, that tiny one was left over.
And that one leftover particle per billion is what makes up all the galaxies and stars and everything we see.
Everything. He gave us the recipe for our own existence. It's a staggering intellectual achievement.
It's mind-blowing.
Yeah.
And he's doing this in the 1960s, after he's been kicked out of the weapons program. There's one more theory of his I want to touch on because it just sounds like science fiction. The many-sheeted model of the universe. Time reversal.
This is where he lets his imagination completely run wild. He was thinking about the arrow of time. Why does time only seem to go forward? Why does entropy disorder always increase?
The egg never unscrambles itself.
Exactly. He speculated that the Big Bang might not have been a singular beginning. He wondered if there might be other sheets of the universe, or a universe that existed before the Big Bang, at time t0.
A mirror universe where time runs backwards.
In a way, he suggested that if you looked at the universe at t0, it might be a CPT reflection of ours. CPT stands for charge, parity, and time. So in this mirror universe, matter would have a negative charge. It would be antimatter, left and right would be flipped, and the arrow of time would point backwards. Entropy would increase as time goes backwards from the Big Bang.
So the Big Bang isn't a beginning. It's a reflection point in a mirror.
Potentially. It's a model of a cyclic universe, one that oscillates or pulsates. It's really speculative, of course, but it shows that he wasn't just a nuts and bolts engineer. He was thinking about the fundamental architecture of reality itself.
And yet, Soviet reality kept pulling him back down to earth with a thud.
Yeah.
Let's go back to that political awakening. We talked about the nuclear testing, but there was another incident, the Lysenko affair. This wasn't about bombs, it was about biology.
This is so important because it shows his commitment to truth, regardless of the field. Trofim Lysenko was a charlatan. He was a pseudoscientist who convinced Stalin that genetics, the entire field of Mendelian genetics, was a bourgeois invention.
He rejected DNA.
He rejected genes, DNA, all of it. He believed in this bizarre idea that you could change a plant's inherited traits by changing its environment. Like if you froze wheat seeds, their children would be permanently cold resistant.
Which is scientifically garbage. It's Lamarckism on steroids.
Total garbage. But because Stalin liked it, it fit with the communist idea that you could re-engineer society. It became state policy. Soviet geneticists were fired. Many were arrested. The greatest, Nikolai Vavilov, died of starvation in a gulag prison.
Unbelievable.
By the 1960s, even though Stalin was dead, Lysenko's followers were still powerful. And in 1964, one of them was up for election to the Academy of Sciences.
And usually these elections are just formalities. You raise your hand and move on.
Correct. But Sakharov couldn't stomach it. He stood up in the General Assembly of the Academy, he grabbed the microphone, and he went nuclear, verbally. He shouted that this faction was responsible for the shameful backwardness of Soviet biology and for the defamation, firing, arrest, even death of many genuine scientists.
He publicly accused a powerful political scientific faction of getting people killed in front of everyone.
The room went silent. It was an absolute scandal. But it worked. The scientist was voted down. Sakharov won the vote, but he lost his safety. Khrushchev was personally furious. He ordered the KGB to start digging up compromising material on Sakharov. That was the moment he went from being a difficult, eccentric genius to an active enemy of the state.
And once that switch flipped in their minds, he didn't pull back. He leaned in. This leads us to 1968, the essay. Reflections on Progress. peaceful coexistence, and intellectual freedom. This wasn't just a speech. This was a manifesto.
This is the Rubicon. In this essay, he tackles everything. Nuclear war, hunger, pollution, freedom of speech. He's connecting all the dots. But the core argument that really upset the military was about anti-ballistic missiles, or ABMs.
Okay, explain this to me. Because logically, a defense system sounds like a good thing. A shield against missiles.
Yeah.
Why did Sakharov, the peace guy, argue against missile defense?
It's the paradox of the shield and the sword. It's about stability. Sakharov argued that the balance of terror worked because both sides were mutually vulnerable, mutually assured destruction. Now, imagine you build a perfect shield, an ABM system that you believe can shoot down all incoming missiles. This destabilizes the entire standoff. Because if Side A thinks they can shoot down Side B's retaliatory strike, Side A might feel safe enough to launch a first strike.
So it makes war more likely, not less.
Exactly. And Side A knows this. So if Side A starts building a shield, Side B has to respond by building more swords, more missiles, more warheads, decoys to overwhelm that shield. It triggers a massive new arms race.
Which is exactly what happened.
It is. Sakharov argued that the only way to be safe was for both sides to agree not to build the shield, to remain mutually vulnerable.
That is incredibly counterintuitive, but it makes perfect game theory sense.
And he was right. This logic eventually became the basis for the ABM Treaty signed in 1972 between the U.S. and USSR. But in 1968, the Soviet military leaders didn't want to hear it. And Sakharov didn't just tell them, he told the world. The essay was smuggled out, published in the New York Times.
That must have been an absolute bombshell in Moscow. A top nuclear physicist airing the country's strategic debates on the front page of the enemy's newspaper.
It was the end of his career in the secret world. He was fired from the weapons program, stripped of his security clearance. He was sent back to the Physics Institute to do pure theory. They thought, okay, we'll park him in a corner and he'll shut up about politics.
Narrator voice. He did not shut up.
Not even a little. In fact, losing his clearance liberated him. He didn't have to protect state secrets anymore. He could focus entirely on human rights. In 1970, he co-founds the Committee on Human Rights in the USSR.
And this is where the tone shifts. He's not just talking about missile strategy anymore. He's talking about political prisoners. He's talking about the right to leave the country, the rights of ethnic minorities.
Yes, and he meets Yelena Bonner. And we absolutely cannot tell this story without her. She was a hardened dissident in a way he was not, at least not yet.
Tell me about her.
Her parents had been arrested and killed in Stalin's purges. She was a pediatrician, she'd served as a nurse in World War II and been badly wounded. She was tough as nails. When they met and eventually married in 1972, she became his backbone.
In what way? Was she guiding him politically?
She connected him to the reality of the Gulag. Sakharov was a brilliant academic. He understood injustice in the abstract. Bonner knew the streets. She knew the families of the prisoners. She attended the trials. And practically speaking, as Sakharov's health declined and the KGB pressure mounted, she became his voice. She smuggled his writings out. She was his link to the Western press.
The KGB must have hated her.
They despised her. They ran these vile smear campaigns, calling her a manipulative Zionist spy, claiming she beat him, claiming she was a foreign agent forcing him to be a dissident. It was all lies, but it shows how much they feared their partnership.
Let's talk about his theory of symmetry regarding the Soviet state. He used to be a believer in the system. How did he describe it now, in this dissident phase?
He started using these powerful medical metaphors. He came to see the Soviet system not as a flawed utopia, but as a cancer cell?
A cancer cell.
Yes. He said it had the key traits of cancer: uncontrolled expansionism, a lack of feedback mechanisms, meaning no democracy or free press, and that it was metastasizing, destroying the healthy tissue around it, both inside the country and abroad.
That is a devastating diagnosis.
And his prescription, his cure, was radical: human rights. He developed this idea that you cannot separate international security from domestic human rights. He argued you cannot trust a state with nuclear treaties if it doesn't respect the rights of its own citizens. If a government lies to its own people every day, it will lie to the world.
Which brings us to 1975, the Nobel Peace Prize. The world agrees with him. They see his point.
They do. The Nobel Committee called him the spokesman for the conscience of mankind. It was a huge validation. But of course, the Kremlin wasn't going to let him go to Oslo to accept it. He was denied travel for reasons of state security, even though he hadn't seen a state secret in 7 years.
So Yelena goes in his place.
Yelena goes. And this is such a poignant, powerful moment. She's in Oslo in this grand hall, surrounded by tuxedos and royalty and applause. She reads his speech, which is titled Peace, Progress, Human Rights. Meanwhile, where is Andrei Sakharov?
Where was he?
He was in Vilnius, Lithuania, standing outside a frozen courthouse in the winter. He was there to support Sergei Kovalev, a biologist and fellow dissident who was being put on trial for anti-Soviet agitation. Sakharov was literally banging on the courthouse door, demanding to be let in to testify as a character witness.
They wouldn't let him in.
The police blocked him. So while the entire world was honoring him, he was in the cold, completely ignored by his own government, doing the actual unglamorous work of human rights.
That image really cements who he was. He didn't care about the medal. He cared about the person on trial. But the Soviet state was losing patience. We're coming up to the end of the 70s. 1979, Afghanistan.
The Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. For Sakharov, this was the red line. This was his cancer cell metaphor made real, the expansionism. He didn't just grumble. He gave multiple interviews to Western press, ABC News. He called it a criminal invasion. He called for a boycott of the 1980 Moscow Olympics.
And that was it. That was the final straw. The hammer came down.
January 22nd, 1980, he's on his way to a seminar at the Physics Institute. His car is pulled over. KGB agents swarm him. He's taken not to a court, but to the prosecutor's office. There's no trial, no judge, no lawyer.
Nothing.
They just read him a decree from the Presidium of the Supreme Soviet, stripped of all state awards. Hero of Socialist Labor gone, Lenin Prize gone, Stalin Prize gone, and he is to be exiled immediately to the city of Gorky.
Why Gorky? What was significant about that city?
Gorky, which is now Nizhny Novgorod again, was a closed city. It was a major hub of military industry submarines, MiG fighter jets. Because of that, foreigners were strictly forbidden from entering. By sending him there, they were putting him in a black hole.
Cutting him off.
Completely. No Western journalists could visit, no diplomats. He was silenced.
Describe his life there. Was he in a prison cell?
No, it was in some ways worse. It was a psychological prison. He and Elena were given a small apartment on the first floor of a dreary building, but the KGB was everywhere. They stationed a police officer outside his door 24/7. They bugged every wall. They constantly followed him. They jammed his shortwave radio so he couldn't listen to the BBC or Voice of America.
The psychological warfare.
It was relentless. It was cruel. They would break in when he was out and steal his manuscripts. He would spend months writing his memoirs, huge stacks of paper, and they would just take it. He'd start over from memory, rewrite it, they'd steal it again.
Oh my God.
They sent him forged letters, supposedly from his son, telling him his wife was cheating on him. They tried to drive him insane. They tried to break him.
But he didn't break.
Oh.
And then came the hunger strikes. This is the part of his story that is really hard to read about.
It is brutal. In 1984, Yelena Bonner was sick. She had a serious heart condition and needed bypass surgery. She wanted to go to the West for it because, frankly, she didn't trust Soviet doctors to operate on her without complications.
And the authorities refused.
Of course. They wanted to keep her there as a hostage, as leverage to control Sakharov.
So he stopped eating.
He declared a hunger strike. I will not eat until my wife is allowed to travel for medical care. He was 63 years old. He had a bad heart himself. This was essentially a suicide threat.
And the KGB's response wasn't to negotiate. It was to torture him.
They let him get weak, and then they forcibly hospitalized him. They tied him to a bed. They inserted a feeding tube through his nose, sometimes damaging the vessels, causing painful bleeding. They pumped a nutrient mix into his stomach. Sakharov describes it in his memoirs, the feeling of suffocation, the humiliation. They would sometimes pry his mouth open with a metal lever.
God. And he endured this for how long?
4 months. He was held in isolation, tormented, and force-fed for 4 months. And then, after a brief respite, he did it again in 1985. A second hunger strike, this one lasting 6 months, on and off. He was willing to die for her.
And it worked.
Ultimately, it worked. The Soviet leadership, now under the new leadership of Mikhail Gorbachev, realized that if Andrei Sakharov died on their watch during a hunger strike over his wife's health, the global backlash would be catastrophic. Gorbachev wanted to present a new, humane face of the USSR to the world. A dead Nobel laureate was very bad PR.
So they caved.
They caved. They let Yelena go to America for her surgery.
That is an incredible testament to his will. He beat the entire Soviet security apparatus with just his stubbornness.
And his love for her. He wrote in his diary, "She is my connection to life." He was fighting for his own life by fighting for hers.
So Bonner gets her surgery. She comes back to Gorky. It's now late 1986. Perestroika is happening, glasnost is happening, and then the phone call.
It's a scene straight out of a movie. December 1986. Technicians suddenly appear at Sakharov's apartment in Gorky. They install a telephone. They say, "You will receive an important call tomorrow."
Who was it?
Mikhail Gorbachev, the General Secretary of the Communist Party himself. He calls and says, "Andrei Dmitrievich, your ordeal in Gorky is over. You and Yelena Georgievna can return to Moscow." He tries to be charming, saying, "Go back to your patriotic work."
Patriotic work, meaning, please stop making trouble for us on the world stage.
Precisely. But Sakharov, being Sakharov, doesn't just say thank you. On that very call, after nearly 7 years of brutal exile, his first act of freedom is to immediately ask Gorbachev to release all other political prisoners by name. He starts listing them.
Unbelievable.
He's just been freed, and his first thought is for the others still locked up.
So he returns to Moscow. There are crowds at the train station. He's a global hero. A normal person would retire, write books, rest, go to the dacha.
He did the opposite. He went into overdrive. He saw the Soviet Union was crumbling, and he felt a profound responsibility to shape what came next. In 1989, he was elected to the new Congress of People's Deputies.
This was the first semi-democratic parliament in Soviet history.
Yes. And watching the old footage of those sessions is electric. You have the old communist hardliners in their gray suits reading boring speeches. And then you have Sakharov hunched over, looking frail, speaking quietly but forcefully about ending the party's monopoly on power, about democracy, about human rights.
There's a famous moment where Gorbachev actually cuts his mic, right?
Yes. Sakharov was at the podium reading a declaration demanding that Article 6 of the Constitution, the one guaranteeing the Communist Party's control, be removed. He was going over his allotted time. Gorbachev, as chairman, looking visibly annoyed, just turns off the microphone.
And Sakharov just keeps talking.
He keeps talking. He keeps reading to the hall. You can hear the shouting from the hardliners telling him to sit down, and the applause from his Democratic supporters urging him on. It was the sound of democracy being born, messy and loud and real.
And he wasn't just speechifying. He was drafting a whole new constitution.
Yeah.
I want to dig into this because it feels so prophetic now. What was in the Sakharov Constitution?
It was incredibly radical and forward-thinking. First, he proposed renaming the country the Union of Soviet Republics of Europe and Asia.
Just removing the word socialist.
Removing the ideology from the name. He wanted a decentralized confederation. He believed that each republic, Ukraine, Georgia, the Baltic states, all of them, should have absolute sovereignty. They should have the right to secede. The union would be a voluntary association.
So a voluntary EU-style arrangement, rather than an empire held together by tanks.
Exactly. He predicted the ethnic violence that would erupt when the empire collapsed. He saw what was already happening in Armenia and Azerbaijan over the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict. He traveled there personally, trying to mediate. He knew that if the Soviet Union just shattered without a legal framework for a peaceful divorce, it would be a bloodbath. He was trying to create a soft landing.
The Union of Soviet Republics of Europe and Asia. It sounds like one of the great missed opportunities of modern history.
A massive one. The hardliners hated it because it stripped them of their central power. The ardent nationalists in the republics ignored it because they just wanted complete independence right now. Sakharov was a voice of reason that everyone heard, but no one was quite ready to heed in time.
And the workload, the stress of it all, it killed him.
It did. December 14th, 1989. He had been working nonstop, speeches in the Congress, meetings with other deputies, drafting the Constitution late into the night. He was in his study preparing for another big speech he was due to give the next day. He told Yelena he was going to take a short nap and to wake him at 11 p.m. When she went in to wake him, he was on the floor. He had died.
Arrhythmia. A heart attack.
The autopsy showed dilated cardiomyopathy. His heart muscle was just completely worn out. He was 68 years old.
68 is young.
Especially
for a mind that was still that sharp.
The stress of the bomb years, the physical torture of the hunger strikes, the immense pressure of trying to build a new country in the parliament, he gave everything he had.
He died in December 1989. The Berlin Wall had just fallen a month earlier. The Soviet Union would officially dissolve 2 years later. He made it right to the finish line, but he didn't get to cross it.
But he saw it coming. He knew the process he'd helped start was irreversible.
So let's talk legacy. There's the Sakharov Prize, which is huge in the human rights world.
The Sakharov Prize for Freedom of Thought, it's the European Union's highest human rights honor. It keeps his name and his ideals alive. Nelson Mandela won it. Malala Yousafzai won it. The Ukrainian people won it recently. It's a living legacy.
And the physics.
The Sakharov conditions are still the standard model for explaining baryon asymmetry in cosmology. Every time a physicist asks, why is there matter, they are starting with Sakharov's work. The tokamak is still the primary design for the future of green energy. His scientific legacy is as secure as his political one.
I keep coming back to that core question, the paradox we started with, the bomb maker and the saint. Do you think he reconciled it in his own mind in the end?
I think he reconciled it through his method. Whether he was calculating a fusion reaction or calculating the injustice of a political prison sentence, he used the same fundamental tool: intellectual honesty.
Explain what you mean by that.
In physics, if your theory says the proton should be stable, but your experiment shows it might be decaying, you don't hide the experiment. You don't ignore the data. You change the theory. You follow the evidence wherever it leads.
Okay.
Sakharov applied that same scientific rigor to society. The Soviet theory said, we are the workers' paradise, the most just society on Earth. But the data, the evidence he saw with his own eyes said, gulags, censorship, poverty, invasion.
So he couldn't ignore the data.
He refused to ignore the data. That's what made him so dangerous to the regime. He looked at the state with the same objective, critical eye he used on an atom. And when he saw it was broken, and not just broken, but malignantly so, he felt a moral and intellectual duty to try and fix it.
There is a quote of his from his exile years that I think wraps this up beautifully. He wrote, "Fortunately, the future is unpredictable, and also because of quantum effects, uncertain."
I love that quote. It's the physicist finding hope in the laws of nature.
Right. He's saying that if the future was a determined, classical, Newtonian machine, we'd be helpless cogs. But because it's uncertain at a fundamental level, because of that quantum randomness, we have agency, we have free will, we can push the particles, we can shape the outcome.
It's the ultimate rejection of fatalism. It means we are all responsible for what comes next.
So here's the thought I want to leave you with. We are living in a time that feels very much like Sakharov's early years, in a way. We have technologies like AI that are rapidly becoming more powerful than we can fully comprehend. We have genetic engineering. We have new, sophisticated arms races. There are scientists working in labs right now who are building the modern equivalents of the third idea.
And the question is, are they asking the questions Sakharov eventually forced himself to ask?
Are they calculating the fallout? And more importantly, if they see the data turning dark, if they see their creations being used for oppression or destruction, will they have the courage to stand up and grab the microphone, even if it costs them everything? Sakharov showed us that the smartest mind in the world is useless without a conscience to guide it.
Amen to that.
Thank you for listening to this deep dive into the life of Andrei Sakharov. It's a heavy one, but a really important one, I think.
Thanks for having me. It was a great conversation.
We'll catch you on the next deep dive. Stay curious.